Hello, my name is Kinlock, and I really like musicals. So when I go see a musical, I have a lot of thoughts that I just want to get out of my head and share with people. And hopefully that's why you're here, because you want to hear my thoughts about the show I saw recently, Tina. Tina, which is the Tina Turner story told through the songs of Tina Turner. Mm. So it's a very specific type of show. Like it's a jukebox musical, but it's a jukebox musical that also tells the story of the artist that made those songs famous or popular, whatever. Um, and yeah, there's some inherent problems in trying to do this with a person's story and the songs, especially if they didn't like write those songs about their life, because there's not necessarily going to be a natural connection between the content of the songs and the content of the story. But we're going to get to that. I want to start by just sort of saying what it is I like about musicals, because there are many things I like. I just love the spectacle and the visuals and the I don't know, the big otherworldliness of it all and the escape of it all. But what other things that can sort of help make a musical successful, and like what do musicals do that other forms of storytelling don't do? Okay, we're going to look at a few types of songs. So one type of song would be an I want song. This is a good way to kind of get inside the character's mind and heart, and you're getting to hear about their true wants and desires, and perhaps you're hearing about secrets that they've never told anyone before and that they wouldn't say out loud. And so you, as an audience member, are kind of getting this secret knowledge. So, an example of that would be, I'm thinking of the producers, and the Matthew Broderick character is like just a boring accountant who looks like all the other boring accountants doing boring accounts. But then he starts to sing, oh, I want to be a producer, and I want to have, showgirls on my arms, and I want to get to wear a top hat and go out for power lunches. And it's like, oh, okay. He's not telling people this, he's not living that life, but that's what his desire is. And so it's like, okay, cool. So now we get to know something about you that other people don't know. Great. That's fun. Another type of song is, the one that sort of establishes the time and place, and you get to sort of learn where we are, when we are, come across the sorts of characters who are going to be in the story. And a good example of that would be something like Skid Row from Little Shop of Horrors. We immediately start to hear a little bit about Seymour's story, and we meet all the types of characters, and there's a homeless guy, and it's like, oh, okay, so this is where we are. This is what we're doing. Okay. And that's fun. Another thing that musicals do well is like you can be quite efficient with your use of time. You can tell a big story in a short time if you need to. So I'm thinking of something like Fontaine in Les Miserables. She sings I Dreamed a Dream, and you sort of get to hear like a whole backstory, and she sort of brings you up to speed. And you can kind of get quite a lot of information in there in those lyrics in just a few minutes. And then through the swelling music and the emotion in her voice and stuff, you also get a sense of how she feels about that story. So by the time we get to the end of it, we're very much caught up, and we're like, wow, okay, yep, I get it now. So these are the sorts of things that musical theatre songs can and do and should do. And that is how, like, the typical structure of a Broadway show would work. But it's not really what Tina does, because the songs were not written in a way that you could do that with them. So you're going to have to do something else with the songs. The trouble is, I don't think the creators of Tina really landed on a specific idea of how they're going to use these songs, because it just sort of seems a little mishmashy, inconsistent, and sometimes the disconnect between what they were saying and what they were trying to portray was just a little too much for me. I was like, I'm not getting it. Why? Even like right from the jump, it starts off with like Tina backstage about to sing a concert. It's clearly like this is the later part of her career, but then we immediately go to flashbacks and her early life, and we meet Anna Mae Bullock, because that's her birth name. And she's in a church, and it's like small town America. They're in like a black gospel-y sort of church. I think her dad might even be the preacher, but we don't know this yet. And they're singing like a gospel song, and she's like being all, the strident one, and being a little bit more vocal than everyone else, which is okay, cool, a way of establishing that she's a good singer. But the song that they're singing is some sort of gospel version of Nutbush City Limits, and I was just like, what is happening? They're in church singing Nutbush City Limits. Okay, I suppose that's just their way of saying we're in Nutbush, but it's not really telling us anything about what Nutbush is or where they are, other than that it's called Nutbush. So, okay, that's a choice. It just kind of landed weirdly for me, partly because that tone wasn't then carried through into other songs, so I couldn't really tune into it. It was just a little bit odd. But that's the sort of thing that this show does, weirdly. And then there's other moments that, you're perfectly set up for what you think is going to be a song that will let you into the rich inner life of the character, and then the scene will just end, and it doesn't do that. I'm like, okay, we're moving on. And so I found, this show a little bit of a rough ride, but I want to sort of give you a bit of an idea of how it's structured and what it does. So it's very much a show of two halves. Like Act 1 does something quite different to Act 2. And is that intentional? So Act 1 is very much the story of Anna Mae discovering her talents and then becoming a singer and turning into Tina Turner, a working singer. And also linked in with that is the relationship of Ike and Tina Turner. And he sort of becomes very much inextricable, like when you can't tear two things too apart. Is that the word? When inextricable, I think that's right, from her life and career. And so they get married and perform together and have kids together and all of that. And she sort of ends up stuck in this very violent, abusive relationship where he's quite controlling, and that's not cool. And then Act 1 sort of ends when she finally manages to get out of that. So then Act 2 is like the aftermath. It's like the following few years where she's really trying to create a career and a life and an identity that is not linked to Ike's reputation and influence. So they're doing two very different things, because Act 1's very violent and dramatic, and then Act 2 is more of her sort of having a lonely struggle, but we meet along the way all these characters who are just trying to help her, but they're often portrayed as kind of goofy music industry folks who are just not serious people. And it just feels like a very different show suddenly. So there was a bit of whiplash there, what's happening. I want to give a shout out to some videos that I've come across recently of someone who reviews shows in New York, like Broadway, where they assess things on two criteria, which is, was I confused? Was I bored? And while I don't want to tread on their toes and steal their ideas, I also think it's a really helpful framework to look at things. And definitely there were several times in this show that I was confused, and there were several times where I was bored. So I want to give examples of what confused me, and it was very much the relationships. So the relationships that Tina has with all these other people were just never given enough meat or enough time to establish themselves. We sort of just accepted that all these people were in her life, but they all just seem so horrible. No one treats her well. there's no inkling that she likes any of them or that they like her. I think they're all just kind of using her, but not even some people don't even get a lot out of that they would benefit from the relationship. I don't know, it was just very, I didn't really get a sense of like how Tina felt about these relationships, or even what the boundaries were of some of these relationships. So for instance, she's singing in the band with Ike and his band, and then there's a thing where she's having a relationship with the guy that plays saxophone, and they're like, oh, don't tell Ike. And it's like, well, why not though? Can you explain why we're not telling Ike? Wait, are you in a relationship with Ike? That hasn't been established. We've only seen him hitting on other girls, so I don't think that's the case. Why not tell Ike? Is there some rule that you're not supposed to like sleep with other band members? Can you just tell us more about why you're trying to keep this relationship a secret? Because it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. I literally do not know the answer. They were trying to keep their relationship secret. And I thought that going to see a story about Tina Turner, I might come out knowing more about it, not less. So this was just confusing. I was like, what's going on? Do I need to go back and rewatch the film? Because that's where the answers are? Oh. So that was confusing. And then around that same time, Ike clearly seems to understand that it's Tina Turner's voice and stuff that's going to be their ticket to success. Even though he's a good songwriter and he's already been a successful musician for a while, he sees this opportunity for her to really take them to the next level. And so he renames the band from the Kings to the Ike and Tina Turner Review. And so he presents this poster and announces that that's what's happening. And we see Tina's reaction as being very much shocked and surprised, and like, my name's Anna May, why are you renaming me Tina? And understandable, but she has this big reaction to being renamed Tina. She has no reaction to being renamed Tina Turner. And I thought that would be the more shocking part, because that's his name. Why is she suddenly getting his name? As far as we can tell at this point, they're not dating, they're not anything to each other. What are they going to do? Are they going to get on stage and pretend to be brother and sister? Or father and daughter? Or husband and wife? Like, it was not clear to me at all. Very confusing. So, and then, as it turns out, he proposes out of nowhere. There's been no indication that they have any feelings for each other. And then suddenly he's like, you should marry me. And so she's like, oh, okay. And they get married. And I'm just kind of going, I don't know what her feelings are about him. And that's not how musicals work. Normally we get to understand your inner feelings, whether it's love, whether it's conflict, whether it's hate, I don't know. But even if you're not telling that outwardly to other characters, tell that to the audience. That's what we are here for. And there's this moment where one of the other singers in the band just is sort of like, I've had enough. This guy is bad news. Tina, you need to leave him, have him not be in your life anymore. I'm going. And the manager comes in and it's all like, yeah, Tina, why are you still with him? That makes no sense. You're not doing yourself any favors. And then they sort of leave her alone in the dressing room, and you could picture it, right? Sitting there alone in the dressing room, contemplating your life and like the choices that led you there, and should I leave my husband, I think he is at this point, and staring at yourself in the mirror, and maybe breaking into song and telling us how you feel and why it's a difficult decision or something. But no, just end of scene, blackout, move on to the next scene. I was like, what? We finally have a really perfectly set up musical theatre moment and you just don't do anything with it. What is going on? And I can even pick a song that would have worked really well there. There's a Tina song called, what's it called? A Woman in a Man's World. And it's a really beautiful song. It's just not that well known, but yeah, I think that could have really been part of her story. And it's all like, you're always right, therefore I'm always wrong, and you say it's black, so even though I know it's white, just like that conflict where she's just having to conform to his world, even because she's got no power, no agency. And I think that could have been used to great effect, but it wasn't. Another way in which that moment could have been used to some sort of effect is like to mirror the parallels between her story and her mother's story, because her mother had always also been in an abusive relationship and taken a while to get out. Then Tina finds herself in an abusive relationship and struggles to get out of it. And like, what if the mother had sung a song at the start about trying to get out, and then Tina does like a little reprise of that? That could have been, that's the sort of thing that musicals do, but it's just not what this show does, which made the whole thing feel very clunky to me. Like, I couldn't quite figure out where we were going. It wasn't like, this happens, therefore that happens, therefore that happens, and because of these people and all these relationships, then when this happens, it leads to that. It was all just like, this happens, this happens, this happens. It all felt very random to me. I guess I wasn't invested, sadly. So I did get a bit bored at times, because I just kind of couldn't connect with these characters. There wasn't enough of them telling us who they are or what their relationships were with each other. It was all very random. But we did get to see a lot of the violence depicted, and it was all depicted in quite like a realistic, literal way, which was also had me thinking, I wonder if that was the right choice, because there's already a film about Tina's life, What's Love Got to Do with It, in which the violence is depicted very graphically, and that's kind of something that films do very well. It's hard to do that the same way on stage, because you've got all these different sight lines of thousands of people seeing things from different angles, and like from where I was sitting, they were going for like a realistic thing and it didn't look real, so then you're just kind of going, okay, I sort of see what you're going for, but you could have, I don't know, maybe rather than trying to depict it realistically, tell us how it makes you feel, because you're not going to be able to depict it realistically as well as a film can. So maybe just try for something more creative. Go with the medium that you're actually in, which is stage, and like a musical. And so maybe sing about it, and or maybe when there's violence, it's like a lighting thing or a sound thing. Maybe it's shadows, and we've got Tina singing about how she feels. I don't know. There just needed to be something else that wasn't this literal depiction of violence, because it wasn't done well enough that I could really buy into it. I was just kind of like, okay, I know what you're trying to depict, but I could also tell that the person's hand was like this far away from the other person's face. So, yeah, they could have done something less literal there. And that is my main takeaway. It's like, okay, you want to use these songs to tell this story. They don't really go together that well. So you can't structure it like a normal musical, because the songs don't lend themselves to that. Maybe even the story might not lend itself to that. And so you've got to just do something more creative and maybe go out on a limb. Which sort of leads me to my next point, which basically I had all these thoughts in my head about like, what is a more creative approach they could have taken? And I don't know what the answer is. There's not necessarily just one answer. But I went to see Better Man, which is the Robbie Williams film. So it tells his story of like the rise and fall and rise of Robbie Williams and his career. And it uses songs from his career and his personal story and mushes them together. Granted, it's not trying to put as much music in as the stage version of Tina, so it's a little bit more restrained with which songs it chooses to use, but I thought it just really did exactly what I was trying to articulate, which is it uses like the emotional truth of the songs to tell the story rather than the literal lyrics and stuff. It's sort of like, well, this is a love song, so it can be told to tell the love story, and maybe in like a montagey kind of way. And this is like a party anthem, And so let's use it when they're celebrating, again, in like a montagey kind of way. um, and so the way that Better Man uses its songs, I just think it's so clever. And I don't know if you know, but it's not really a spoiler. This is on the posters, but this is partly what just intrigued me to want to watch this film was the fact that Robbie Williams is portrayed as a monkey or a chimp, like a primate of some kind. And so the whole thing is you're watching like this CGI monkey who everyone just treats like he's a guy. And I was like, this is interesting because I cannot take my eyes off this Weta Workshop CGI monkey. And there's nothing literal or fathomable about why that works. It's just, but there's an emotional truth to it because I remember having that reaction to Robbie Williams in his heyday. Like, there's something about him, you just could not take your eyes off him. He's got that much charisma and he just was always in headlines and he was just all ego all the time. And I don't know, this monkey, I don't know, I felt like I was watching Planet of the Apes, sort of achieved that without, and it was done so well that it doesn't quite delve into the uncanny valley of, Cats 2020 or anything. 2019, sorry, Cats 2019. Yeah, so I was just like, yes, this is the approach I want from a biopic jukebox musical. It's like these songs and the story are not going to mesh together well, literally. So let's go for something sort of creative and vibey. It worked. And I think that other endeavors have also taken that approach, like Rocket Man, the Elton John story is a bit like that. And the Cole Porter one, De Lovely, is a bit like that. And maybe that just works better on film, but I don't know, we've seen from things like Sunset Boulevard, the recent Jamie Lloyd version of that these grand concepts can also work on stage. And bring back weird. Yeah, I think Tina was really just too conventional for me, but it wasn't conventional in a music theatre convention or a stage convention. It was just, I don't know, it was just trying to do something. It was just trying to be very straightforward, and I was like, be less straightforward, please. Do something to surprise me. That was what I wanted from it. Yeah, okay. See you later. Or you'll see me later.